Well, if I'm fishing at night and I'm leaving a bait out, there's always a chance on a boilie that you're going to catch a smaller fish, but generally speaking, in my experience, you tend to catch the bigger fish, and not always on the biggest boilies. I mean, big baits for big fish is the old maxim, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, but there seems to be some reason the carp will bully the way and get in front of the other fish to home in on them. So as far as I'm concerned, the boilie is like a real staple ingredient in terms of my match fishing baits, and to be honest, if I hadn't used boilies, I think there would have been a lot less carp put on the bank. And you know, it's just nice to use a quality bait, thing that you've got confidence in. There's lots of baits around and you have to make your own decision up at the end of the day. As far as I'm aware, I just stick with what I know best and try and keep it simple, because I think that's the key. Now if you're fishing and using boilies, there's lots of times when you can chuck a lot of bait in, big bed of boilies, and you catch lots of fish. Certainly around about springtime when they're building up for spawning, and towards the end of summer as they're getting ready for hibernation. And that's fine, and that's great, you know, you can pile them all in. On other occasions, it's better to use what we consider match fishing tactics, and that's like a little and often approach, and you'll still probably get through the same amount of bait at the end of the session, but what you're doing is you're actually putting little amounts of bait in, maybe 5 or 6 boilies in on a regular basis, and firing them out in the area where they want to be, and I think that noise will certainly attract fish. And if it attracts seagulls while you're firing them out with a catapult or using a throwing stick, you can bet your bottom dollar that the carp will be intercepting him, and sometimes they'll take them on the drop. I've just fired 5 boilies out there, and right in the middle of that cluster of boilies where they group together, I've just seen a lovely flat spot appear. That tells me that there's something rooting around down on the bottom, and it wouldn't surprise me if that right hand rod doesn't fire off at some stage in the next few minutes. But keep the bait going in, don't put it all in one go, because you can't take it back out again. Keep dripping it and dripping it, and if you're catching it and dripping it, then you know you're on to a winner. And I always think that bait falling through the water will attract fish, and eventually they'll come down on the bottom, and these fish move around the lake all the time. It's not a massive lake, they'll follow the wind, and then they'll see some boilies going through the water, and that might just be the ticket that you need to get them down onto the bottom and get them feeding. And I'm really confident now that I'll get a few bites. So I'm going to do the same on each of the baited swims, just 3 or 4, maybe even half a dozen boilies, and I'll keep doing that once every 15 or 20 minutes. And my old mate the cuckoo's still giving me an audience, so things can't be all that bad. Lovely plopping noise of them boilies hit the water. That'll do. Now just sit and wait. Well, that's a run. I've not put my buzzers on, and you can hear it quite plain as day, even despite the cuckoo. The only time I put my buzzers on these days is when I'm fishing at night. I've got to a situation where I turn them off, and there's nothing finer than listening to the ratchet on the reel on the front drag there. Got nothing against buzzers particularly, I just think if you draw less attention to yourself, then you can sneak a few more out without all the leads coming landing where you're fishing. And that fish is taken after literally 10 minutes of putting 30 or 40 loose feed offerings in that area. You saw me fire the bait out, and this is in real time, so it's just so rewarding when that happens, because you know it's working. I'll catch this fish, cast out again, fire another 10-15 boilies in the same area, and it just seems to be a way of holding the fish, just like a big bed would do. But this way round, you've got more chances of it not backfiring on you. Well, being near Brize Knot, you get a lot of aircraft, and it's just nice to see that old train of VC-10 flying over. I used to work on the engines of VC-10s when I was an apprentice at Rolls-Royce in Nottingham, so playing a nice lump like this, watching a VC-10 is it's a bit of a privilege really. And I was just going to change that middle rod to a pop-up because I didn't feel like the bottom baits were working. I think they're working in terms of getting fish into the swim, as this is proving, but I don't think they're taking it on the hook. They seem to want the pop-up, and I was just about to switch that onto the old pineapple Hawaiian, and well, the rest's history, and this roared off, so I've only got one other rod in the water. But it's a nice mirror. It's certainly mid-doubles, I would think, at first guess. Always difficult to tell until you know the width of them, but there's some brilliant fish in here, and it's just a fabulous place. I've come here and fished in the winter and struggled, and you know, you come on a day like today, oh, well, you can see the fish. There he is. He's just skulking away under the weeds there. That just came off just at the net. I'm quite happy with that really. I mean, I would have liked to have had it on the bank and took a picture maybe, but it was a fish, I would reckon 15 or 16 pound, lovely looking fish, very wide, and it's just come off. It's gin clear water, so it's 1-0 to that carp, but I'll come back and catch him another day. Now that's a sound you don't hear too often. Well, I certainly don't anyway. That's my reel just spinning off there, no buzzers, just nice and quiet, not drawing attention, and we're in. All I've got to do now is just tighten that front drag up a bit. And with a bit of luck, we might get this one in the net. Well, that took about 20 or 30 yards of line off, and it's such a great feeling, isn't it, picking up. You don't know how big it is. There's a lot of weed out there. But so I don't get into trouble with my other rods. What I normally do now is I'm going to pop these off the rests and just drop them off the runners. If I get a bite, I'll still know about it because I'll hear the reels going, but that just keeps the line nice and flat, and I can play this fish over the top of there without getting, as they call it, wiped out, which is not a pleasant experience. I've had a couple of rods tangled up in the past, but it's best to try and avoid it. Again, on the pop-up, pop-ups seem to be working a lot more these days than they used to, and I would have to say that I used to be a big bottom bait fan and just nailing it on the deck, but certainly the pop-up's making a big impression on my carp angling at the moment. I think it's cyclical anyway, it comes and goes, but just the presentation of the bait being off the deck by about an inch or so, I think just cons those carp that are a bit riggy. And we've managed to put several carp on the bank, not one on a bottom bait. But of course the bottom bait's going in there as loose feed. Again, another little top up, almost an instant response, and interestingly enough it's always been on the outside rods. I've not had a run on the middle rod, and this is typical. If you can imagine you're fishing a match and you're sat right in the middle of a load of match anglers and the top end peg or the end peg at the bottom, then you've got a lot more chance of fish running towards you, and that's why end pegs are normally better. And if you just see your 3 rods as being pegs, then the end 2 pegs generally are the most productive. Now I'm just applying a nice even pressure to this fish. It's going to be probably a double at worst, but you can never tell sometimes till you've got it right under the rod top. I'll just loosen that drag off a bit there because it's a nice sound, but I'm actually using the drag. I'm not back winding on this at all. Rod's out of the way, so I can just slip this one over the net, and hopefully this one won't come off. You can see that yellow pop-up boilie nicely sticking outside of its top lip. Fish getting towards doubles, I would say. Not caught anything under doubles here. And there you go. The proof of the pudding is in the pop-up. Nicely in the top lip. Tiny hook, just pops out. I'll take my watch off here because I don't like handling fish when I've got watches or bangles on. And nice dumpy fish. A sucker punch on the pop-up. And we get that one back in the water and get back to my rods. Well, this is one of my favourite little tricks for catching a few carp, and they're feeding well. I've put about half a kilo of complex in, that's the frozen ones, and I'm using these